Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thank you so much for being here. Before we get to the latest, before we get to Trump and COVID and all the rest, I got to share a little come to Jesus moment I had on Saturday afternoon, and it ties into all this Trump COVID stuff. So traditional talk radio and TV, like in the political world, the obvious and easiest and therefore most common thing to do is to be angry all the time. Just to yell and complain and be negative and everything is the end of the world all the time. It plays on your emotions very easily, which is why so many people do it and so many people have been very successful and make a lot of money doing it. And I've never felt comfortable doing that. So years ago, I had like a midlife radio crisis or whatever. And I tried to be something different and be more optimistic and hopeful. And I think I've done okay with that. A nice compliment I get from time to time is like, you're a breath of fresh air. And I just feel like that like encompasses what I'm trying to do, right? We take the news of the day, but add a little history, do a little storytelling, try to connect things to more eternal truths of life and faith and family and things like that. But about 3 weeks ago, I don't know if this was a conscious decision or a subconscious decision. I don't know what happened exactly. But I thought, all right, it's politics time here. So let's sort of gear up and get ready and let's table this for a while, right? So Paul in Philippians 4:8, he said, whatever's true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I said, okay, Paul, let's table that for a couple months here while we focus on the election. Let's put that aside because it's politics time. Sure, it'll be ugly for a while, but let's dive in head first. It's only going to be a short little season, and then we get back to all that lovely yada yada stuff, Paul. These last 3 weeks have been miserable for me, personally. I've spent way too much time on Twitter. Have you seen the documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma? I think it's called The Social Dilemma. Please watch it tonight. Watch it tonight. It's on Netflix. It's amazing to see. It's the people in it are like the former president of Pinterest and like the guy who invented the like button on Facebook and all the people at all the different tech companies. And they're like, oh, what we've created is a horrible, horrible thing. And to see how the social media companies manipulate you. They do not care about you. They do not love you. There's two industries that describe their customers as users: drug dealers and social media companies. And I just got sucked into, I've always been sucked into to a point. So I had a phone addiction years and years ago, and I ended up getting basically like a flip phone for a while, for like over a year. And I like broke that addiction. So I'm like better with phones a little bit, but I've been really sucked back in these last couple of weeks and months. And it's terrible. It takes me away from my family. The president of Pinterest talked about how he would create Pinterest and make it more manipulative and addictive. And then he would go home and be addicted to it and not be present with his young kids. He's like, I knew what we were doing and I was falling, right? So it was taking me away from my family. It was taking me out of the present moment. C.S. Lewis in Screwtape Letters, he talks about how we are taken out by regret of the past and worry of the future. And he says we need to live in the present because the present is where God is, and that's where we touch eternity. I've always loved that dynamic. Regret of the past, worry of the future, but in the present moment is where God is, and that's where it touches eternity. I like that visual. But just living in politics land, it filled me with so much anxiety and stress and anger. And on Saturday, I just couldn't take it anymore in light of Trump, getting COVID and just everyone freaking out. And here's what I realized. I can't be responsible for other people's delusions. I can't be responsible for all the delusions of the world that everyone has in the political realm. And I need to give that up. That yoke was way too heavy. This documentary, Social Dilemma, it talks about how we were designed as humans to care about what people think of us. And that's good, right? It's good because we were designed to live in small tribes of people. And we're in close contact with each other. We're a social animal. This is our strength, is that we work together. And part of that bond is you care about what other people think of you. You care about what other people think of your behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good thing. Problem is, we were never designed to care about what everyone on the internet thinks about us all the time, and our actions and our looks and our opinions and our behavior. We're operating way past the capacity of our brains and, more importantly, our souls. So from that, it just hit me like I can't be burdened with making sure that everyone agrees with me and then get upset when they don't. I mean, does that happen to you? Like, I just get so frustrated. And I know maybe there's some people who are like Jesse Kelly, right? Who can just say whatever they think, and everyone can write them hate mail all day long, and they just brush it off as no big deal. I just like, I'm not that guy. I get upset. It's like, at first it used to be, oh, they don't like me. Years ago, that was a problem. Like, oh, I need people to like me. I'm over that. Now it's more like, oh, like, why can't you see the truth here? Like, what are you thinking? And it's too much. Can't do it. I'm not supposed to take on everything in the world. And I'm not supposed to, my job is not to free everyone from their delusions. Just on the top of my head, I can't get this off my chest, or out of my head, is the Breonna Taylor example. How many people still think that the police went to the wrong house? What percentage of people still think that the police knocked down the door of the wrong house? Like, that's a delusion if you think that. And it made me angry that people still think that. But their delusion can't be my burden. Along with that, no one's made to take in all the opinions and all the hot takes of everyone in the world all day long. It's too much. Our brains and our souls were not made to handle it. And I just need to get back to what's true. So let me give you an example from this weekend. Like this all hit me this weekend really, really hard. So I want to give you an example here. This is Gabriel Sherman, who is Vanity Fair. Is it Vanity Fair, I think? This was right after Trump sent out the video of him in the hospital, right? So this wasn't the video before he got on the helicopter. This is the video of him in the hospital, the first video that came out. It was like a 4-minute video, I think, something like that. So Gabriel, so I saw it, and I think I was like most people, I was like, what? Like, he looks pretty good. Like, everyone thought he was gonna die, and here he is, like, sitting here talking off the cuff. Like, he looks pretty good. And Gabriel Sherman, he wrote this, he said, I just watched Trump hospital video a second time. His breathing is clearly labored. He seems to be leaning on the table for support. There's so much fear in his eyes. I'm just like, oh man, like what? Like, what are you watching? And I can't be responsible for the you. Here's another one. I don't have this tweet in front of me. You guys have the next tweet? This is Gabriel Sherman too. Oh yeah, oh, hold on. There's one under that. Let me pull it up here. Because what Gabriel Sherman writes here is important. Here it is. Okay, sources. Trump has had heart palpitations on Friday, a positive negative side effect of Regeneron antibody treatment. We'll talk about that with the professor coming up. His fever reached 103. And a G7 ally wonders if he'll appoint Ivanka president instead of Pence. And then what we just showed up there is this is Steve Schmidt, the MSNBC guy. And he's like, oh, the incomparably sourced Gabriel Sherman, right? We're gonna now. So there's this whole thing going around that Ivanka is gonna be the next president. Okay, you wanna know where this source came from? You wanna know what that source is? A G7 source? Follow this. The truth of that is an outside White House advisor I don't even know what's an outside White House advisor, told me that a high-level government official from a G7 country asked the outside White House advisor. So follow this, right? Some official, whatever that even means, from a foreign country, asked an outside advisor to Trump, whatever that even is, asked him if Trump can appoint Ivanka to be president. And he sends that tweet out, and it just goes out, and now people are claiming that Trump is gonna appoint Ivanka to be the president. Like, that's a total delusion. And Gabriel Sherman frames it as a G7 ally wonders if. It's like, what? Just creating panic. And it just buys into this whole like Trump coup narrative. And like, no, that won't happen. It can't happen. You're living in a delusion, man. And I can't get upset at this guy's delusion anymore. I can't be responsible for debunking every delusion that exists in the world and all the people who fall for it. And we're all living it to an extent. I'm not saying I'm immune to it, right? It's just really tough when we live in a world where you can believe whatever you want. I saw a headline the other day that Biden is up by 14 points now, and just crushed Trump in the debate, and Trump's in free fall because of the debate. And then this morning I read that a poll that Trump's up by, or just still down by 2. And the debate didn't move anything at all. And you're like, what is it? It's whatever you want. And I don't know what we're supposed to do with that when you can just live in whatever world you want. And we can do this all day. I heard a ton of people the other day outraged that the president gets this lavish, socialized healthcare at Walter Reed and only paid $750 for it. Like, what? Like, all of that is wrong. Like, that's not, Walter Reed's not socialized healthcare, and he didn't pay just $750 in taxes. Like, everything about that's wrong. Everyone and their mother suddenly this weekend became an expert on COVID treatments and reading into what doctors said and didn't say and should have said, not to mention every single second guessing of every decision the president's ever made regarding COVID. And no one cares what Pelosi and de Blasio and Democrats across the country were saying, like, come on down to Chinatown, come to Mardi Gras, nothing to worry about. That was in late February. That was a month after Trump shut off travel from China. No accountability to the Democrats who did any of that stuff. I heard people yesterday say that, I think we have a picture, guys, here, a video of the motorcade moment. Right, so it's like nice moment. Trump's in the hospital. All these people come outside the hospital, whatever. Trump's like, you know what? I want to get in the car and I want to drive by and I want to wave to people. Okay, like that's a nice little thing. And what's the big deal? And I heard all these people say that Trump shouldn't have done that because he's putting everyone at risk. First I heard everyone all the people there at risk. And I thought, what? What do you mean he's putting those people at risk? What are you talking about? And then I hear all this thing now about, it's outrageous what the president did, putting his Secret Service members at risk. Trump doesn't even care about the Secret Service members. And you're like, oh man, like, first of all, like you really care. Second of all, you're making all that up. You're making it all up. You have no idea what precautions were taken by the Secret Service. You have no idea what precautions have been taken by the president. You're just making everything up. You are making up movies in your head about everything and then getting mad about that, and I can't deal with you. And these, of course, are the same people who had no problem with every Black Lives Matter protest across the country. Give me a break. So I'm playing a different game. I'm playing the game of truth, perspective, and peace. That's the new mantra of the show. Truth, perspective, peace. So first we're gonna take a story, and then we're gonna tell the truth about it, the truth, what we know. We're not gonna make stuff up. We're not gonna make up movies and then get mad about that. So we're gonna provide the truth, then we're gonna provide perspective. I believe there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that we're doing now has been done before. There's historical examples everywhere all around the world. So much of our anxiety, if we like wrote down the things we're anxious about today, and we talked to people from hundreds of years ago, they would laugh in our faces like we're a bunch of little babies. Like, oh, you think this is bad? Let me tell you a little something about fascism, you child. All these people complaining that Trump is a fascist. You can't yell and scream about the leader of the country being a fascist in a fascist country, okay? Like the fact that you're yelling and screaming that the president is a fascist and you're not dead is proof he's not a fascist. If you yell and scream about the president being a fascist in a fascist country, they kill you. But you live in a delusion. So this is my mission statement. Speak truth, give perspective, bring peace. That's what I need. I don't know about you. I need peace. Everyone else is trafficking in anxiety. I can't do it anymore. Psalm 82 is a wild scene. God is speaking sarcastically to the leaders of the world. And Psalm 82, he says, I said, you are gods. Oh, you're all sons of the Most High, right? He's like, God's like, oh, look at you. Oh, you think you're so strong. You think you're so powerful. And then God says, but you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. God is in charge, not Trump, not Biden, not Twitter, not the collective dumpster fire that is Twitter. Certainly not me. God is in charge. And that first scripture I shared, to think about where Paul said, think about whatever's true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, and praiseworthy. Right? which I have not been doing these last few weeks, and I feel it. The line before that in Philippians, Paul said, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Don't you think we all need a little more peace? And I'll just tell you here outright, you don't just get it through like meditation and breathing or whatever. Like that's a great practice, but you need the peace of God. And I will do a better job, and I recommend we all curate our inputs accordingly. And my goal here is to give you a place to find that peace, because I know I need it more than ever. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, one of my favorite writers is Rod Dreher. He's got a book called The Benedict Option. Of course, you have to read that. He's an Eastern Orthodox Christian. He's a writer at The American Conservative. You have to follow him there. And he's got a new book, Live Not by Lies, a manual for Christian dissidents. Rod Dreher, how are you, Rod?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me on this morning.
Really, really good to talk to you. So I got a ton of questions, but let me just throw it to you first. And what's the premise of the book here?
Premise of the book is that people in the United States who grew up under Soviet communism are starting to see signs in this country that America is becoming like the countries they left behind. It's moving slowly towards a sort of soft totalitarianism. That's the first part of the book, is that diagnosis. The second part is me going to countries of the former Soviet bloc, talking to Christians and others who survived, who were dissidents under Soviet communism, who survived it and who have practical advice for Americans, particularly American Christians, for how we can prepare ourselves for what's to come here.
So we just outlined in the segment before you're here, kind of my new approach to the show. And the first thing is to take a current event, then tell the truth, then give perspective, and then bring peace. And it sounds like, well, you're all those, certainly, but this perspective here is what we are so lacking in our country today.
Yeah.
Why do people think, well, all those things, truth, peace, and perspective, but why do people in America think it won't happen here? Like, why do we have this delusion that it'll never happen here?
Yeah, and that was what Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the great Soviet dissident, warned us about. He said, the greatest mistake you can make in America and in the West is thinking it can't happen here. Well, we don't think it can happen here because we're America, we're exceptional. History doesn't affect us here. In fact, it can. And I think also it terrifies us too much to think about losing our middle-class status and our liberties. And it should terrify us to think about this country becoming a more totalitarian place. But if we hold on, Mike, to this sort of optimism that it can't happen here, then we're going to remain blind to things that are actually going on at precisely the time when we ought to be acting both to fight it and to prepare ourselves and our families and our communities for what we will do if we lose that fight.
What is, give me just one thing about that these Soviets have seen here in America that reminds them of where they came from.
Well, I got the idea for the book when I got a call from an American doctor. His mother is a Czech immigrant to the U.S. who spent 4 years in a concentration camp in in Czechoslovakia under communism for her Christian faith. He called me back in 2015 after the attack on Memories Pizza, this little evangelical pizza parlor in rural Indiana. This was during the whole Religious Freedom Restoration Act controversy there. This evangelical pizza parlor said on TV, we wouldn't cater a gay wedding. Suddenly, boom, there was a flash mob at the restaurant. They received death threats. They had to shut it down. This Czech woman said, son, this is the kind of thing that happened in Czechoslovakia when communism came. It's that sort of thing, that and cancel culture, and people having to be afraid of losing their jobs or being on the wrong side of identity politics. All of these things are part of a quickening that the people who grew up under Soviet communism, they know where this is going, but we don't. We're just sitting here like like bumps on a log, thinking that everything's going to be okay.
Okay, let me push back. Are you exaggerating, right? Are you making, you're doing the slippery slope fallacy, and sure, that Memories Pizza thing was a weird little thing, but that's not going to turn into totalitarianism. Come on, Rod.
Yeah. Well, all I'm telling you is it's happening over and over and over again. And these people who know where this sort of thing goes are saying, wake up, America. I stood, Mike, at a memorial last fall in Moscow, south of Moscow, at a place called Batovo Field, where the KGB, over a 14-month period, executed 21,000 political prisoners. The site now is a national monument to those who were killed in political violence. When I went there last fall on that day to do some reporting, an old Russian man who had come there to pray for his family members killed there said, "What are you doing here?" Seeing that I was a foreigner. My translator told him about this book and that people were starting to lose jobs in America because of politics. The old man shook his head and said, that's where it always starts, losing jobs for political reasons. It doesn't end there. And we can continue to lie to ourselves and say it's not going to happen here. And meanwhile, we're seeing the woke, the militant progressives walk through so many institutions, take them over and turn them into ideological indoctrination factories. All the while we're sitting here saying it can't happen.
What do you think, what have you learned is the line between that, which is you lose a job, to violence? Like that's I think a big bridge maybe to cross. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a little one. I don't know. But what are you looking for that's like, oh, whoa, that's the next thing?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point, Mike. I call this soft totalitarianism, not hard totalitarianism. And that's an important distinction. Under hard totalitarianism, that's what they had in the Soviet Union. That's what George Orwell talked about in 1984. It involves gulags, secret police, and torture and that sort of thing to compel people to conform. I don't think we're going to have that here. I really don't, because I don't think we're going to need it here. Rather, ours is going to be a softer form using coercion within institutions, within the workplace and things like that to get people to conform. In fact, I think what we're going to have is something like the Chinese social credit system. In China, the government, one way the government maintains control over the population is it collects tons and tons of data from the way people use their smartphones to the way they use their computers. It compiles the data on algorithms, and it gives every single Chinese person a social credit rating. This rating talks about how trustworthy they are. So if you do things that are socially positive as far as the government is concerned, like listen to the speeches of Xi Jinping, you get a higher rating. If you do socially negative things like go to church or hang around with dissidents, you get a lower rating. If you have a low rating, you can't travel around the country. You can't get the better jobs. Your kids can't go to the best universities. This is a soft way that they get people to comply and to accept the ideology of the regime. I think that's what we're getting here, because already our corporations are collecting massive amounts of data from us and storing it with our consent. It's not going to take much to turn that into a system of coercion.
Totally. And this ties in, everyone, as well, to what we were just talking about, Rod, in the last segment, the Social Dilemma documentary that was on Netflix, which was excellent. And tied all about the manipulation of it all. So to what end, though, right? Because the point of the social dilemma was that the social media companies can manipulate your behavior and thoughts and actions very slightly. And I believe it was to the end of keep you on longer so we can sell an ad to you.
Right.
What would be a soft totalitarian's end? Like, why manipulate people? Why control people? Why collect the data? What's the end goal of that?
Well, if you listen to what the so-called social justice warriors say, they want to bring about a utopia of equity, of racial equity, of gender equity, and so on and so forth. If you consider the social justice movement not as a political movement, but as an alternative religion, everything becomes a lot clearer. Because Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the dissident, said that the line between good and evil runs down the middle of each human heart, a very Christian take on human nature and society. But for the social justice warriors, the line between good and evil runs between races, between sexes, between all the people who are good, sacred victims and all the exploiters. This is precisely how they ran it in the Soviet Union, except instead of using identity, they used social class. In the Soviet Union, what they did, they used this terror to try to bring about the classless utopia. But what they ultimately did was create hell on earth. I think our social justice warriors in power are going to do the same thing here. And it's not going to work, but there's going to be a lot of people with lives ruined before the truth finally comes out, unless we stop it now.
I want to, a couple months ago, we talked to one of the top social psychologists in the country. And I asked him about, I forget what we were talking about exactly, but I said something like, well, what does that do to someone's soul? And he said, well, in my field, we don't talk about the soul. But if you mean, what does it do to the brain? And he went on, and I was like, oh, that's such an interesting dodge. Like, we don't talk about the soul. I know you do. So what does this soft totalitarianism do to the individual's soul?
Well, it teaches us to live within a lie. The totalitarian system can only be maintained by everybody agreeing that it's the truth, even if it's a lie. And what they make you do is be so afraid to go against the lie that you conform. And eventually, under totalitarianism, it's not enough that you obey. You have to learn to love Big Brother. And I think that we see this sort of thing happening within educational institutions. But what that does over time is it accustoms you to living within a lie and accustoms you to thinking that truth doesn't really exist. The truth of who you are doesn't exist. And you have to learn how to tell lies and live with lies in order to keep your sanity and to thrive within that system. This is why people like Václav Havel, who was not a Christian, he was a secularist, but he also agreed with Solzhenitsyn that you have to live not by lies. He said when someone who believes in the truth stands up and is willing to suffer for the truth, suffer the persecution of the state, simply to say, I will not live by these lies, then he regains his soul. He ceases to be a demoralized person. He may suffer in his body, but he has regained his soul and his human dignity, and he stands as a sign to others that you don't have to live within the lie.
30 seconds, devil's advocate. What's the big deal, Rod? You play along, your kids go to a good school, you keep your good job, you make money, you live a happy, healthy life for your family, and all you got to do is tell a couple propaganda lines, blah, 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 whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
Big deal is you lose your soul. If you're a Christian, you will ultimately lose your soul and maybe eternal life. But if you're just an ordinary person, you will lose your sense of integrity, you will lose your sense of dignity, and you will lose your own children. This is important. We cannot live by lies and still live with integrity and respect ourselves.
Yeah, wow. All right, live not by lies, Rod Dreher, and then go to the American Conservative and read everything that Rod writes. Rod, I'm always grateful for your thoughtfulness, and I love the length of your articles, right? I think I like how, I mean that genuinely, right? Everyone's trying to be short. Yeah. And you're like, no, I'm gonna take time to write this out properly. And I just wanna encourage you in that. So thank you, sir.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike.
Live not by lies, Rod Dreher. All right, we'll talk to the professor coming up next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So in light of everything we've just been talking about and how I just can't take the politicization of everything anymore, I intentionally stayed away from this weekend from all the doctors, well, not only their press conferences, but like the reporting on their press conferences, because like these reporters don't have any clue what any of this stuff really means. So I wanted to stay away from it until we could talk to Professor Vincent Raccaniello, of course, who we talk to every Monday. And he's the professor of virology at Columbia University. And you got to watch his podcast, watch or listen, microbe.tv. It's called This Week in Virology. And why are you not watching it yet? Of course, you know all about it. Professor, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty well. Thank you very much.
Good. I'm glad you're here. So let's talk maybe we should start with like medicines, like and treatments. What is your understanding of what the president was given and why?
So this is tough because who knows what he's actually been given, right? But one of the things I'm pretty sure he got, and I have multiple sources, is a monoclonal antibody cocktail that is made by Regeneron. And this is an experimental drug that consists of two monoclonal antibodies. These are proteins that bind the virus and block it from infecting cells. And that has just been through a 250-person study. It's still ongoing. It looked like it works pretty well when you give it early in infection. This is the key here. And I think they caught the president early in infection, and they decided to give him this monoclonal antibody cocktail, which would really knock down the virus early before it made serious problems. And most of us can't do that because this drug is not approved for anyone else yet. So if you give these drugs to people in the hospital, it's too late because the virus has already done its damage. But my guess is in his case, it was pretty early on. So they're going to catch the virus before it can do a lot of damage. And so that's one drug that I think is key here, the monoclonal antibody cocktail from Regeneron.
Wow. Okay, well, that could be potentially very good news moving forward for other people as well, if, again, caught soon. I've heard the word experimental. There's a couple words you said there that I've heard lately I'd like to find. So how do you define experimental? What does that technically mean?
So technically it means that the FDA has not approved the use of the drug in people. So it's not gone through all the tests that have to be done before the FDA approves it. So it's experimental. There's not even an emergency use authorization, which means you got some results with your drug which look pretty good. And so the FDA says, okay, we can do emergency use, which means if you have a case where you think you need this, tell us and we'll give you approval for it. What the president got was experimental use, compassionate use. His physicians applied and they got it for that. But, we couldn't do that.
So that's very experimental. It sounds like almost like, I don't want to say recklessly so, but I mean, if you said it's only been really tried in 250 people in a trial, is that right?
Yeah, so far. And, there were a couple of adverse effects, right? Serious adverse effect, no deaths, but people had some reactions. We don't know the nature of those. So it's a little bit risky, but I think if I don't know what the procedure was, but I know people at Regeneron. They're good virologists there and good scientists. And, if they spoke with the White House physicians, they probably told them, we think this is okay. That would be my guess.
Whoa. Do you think that's how that took place? Do you think there was a behind-the-scenes conversation with the Regeneron people and the doctors?
I'm sure there had to be, because this is not approved, so you can't just get it, right? So you have to go to the source.
Wow, I would love to talk with the Regeneron scientist who talked with the president of the United States doctor and had to put his name and be like, no, we really think this is good because we're about to give it to the president. You better be right. Whoa, that is awesome.
You have to think of it. That's a big risk, right? You have to be sure that you're not going to have any. You don't want to hurt the guy. That's not a good idea.
No. Well, and so even if there's a small risk, whatever that even means, small risk, but wow, that's amazing. So does cocktail just mean a combination of different things? Is that what that means when people use that word?
So there are two different antibodies that bind in two different parts of the spike of the virus. So they're kind of additive, right? That's what we mean by a cocktail. It's a mixture of those two.
Okay. And then when you say binds, can you explain that a little more? What
so, the virus, here, let me get the virus for you.
Yeah. I know you have a couple different models here.
Okay. So here's a simple one. This one, these little protrusions, this is a spike. And when this virus attaches to cells, remember viruses have to get inside cells to make more of themselves. They attach by the spike. And if you make antibodies to the spike, they will prevent the virus from getting into the cells. And as you can see here, the spike is rather big. And so antibodies can bind to different parts of it. So they would you could have two different antibodies binding at once. And so that's what this cocktail is, a mixture of two antibodies that bind two different parts of that spike protein. Yeah.
Amazing. And what else do we know? What else do we know? Because I've heard this dexamethasone.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because dexamethasone is an immune system suppressor, right? So patients who have really serious COVID later in infection, when they're having lung problems, it's an immune overreaction, right? And so we give them dexamethasone to suppress their immune system, and it helps in many cases. I would not think you would give it very early in infection because that's when you need the immune system to block the virus, right? So I'm a little puzzled by the Dex, if in fact he got it, because you would not want to give it early on in infection because it'll just make the virus reproduce more. So there's one of two possibilities. Either he didn't get it or he's actually later in infection than we think, and he's getting some lung damage. So they may have done an X-ray and said, oh, there's lung damage, immune mediated, let's give him Dex. That's what I think is going on.
Yep. And then I've also heard a lot about steroids. Is that what remdesivir is, or is that something different too?
Yeah, it's basically, dexamethasone is a steroid,
That's
right?
what that
It's
is.
a immune suppressor, yeah. Now, the other one you just mentioned, remdesivir, I heard he got that. I'm not sure, but that is the only antiviral that can be used for COVID right now, and it only has been given to really sick patients, very much like the monoclonals. But if you give it earlier, it will help. So I think that's a wise decision because that could block virus really early on and prevent it from going out of control.
Wow. So it sounds like, and again, we don't know, right? But it sounds like that's a lot of things, it sounds like.
It is a lot of things, but they're doing different things, right? And that's fine. So you can do a combination. So we have Dex, which is inhibiting the immune response. We have the monoclonal cocktail, which is blocking virus from getting in. And then remdesivir, if there's any virus already in the cell, that will block it there. So all different modes of action. It seems to me that that's okay. And we don't know if the combination is a problem because no one's tested them all. Typically, you would test drugs in combination, but I think it makes sense.
Okay, anything else stand out about what you've heard so far with his treatment?
I heard that he had some low blood oxygen early on. I don't know if that's true or not. It's hard to know because there are all kinds of rumors floating around. But if that's true, that would suggest he has lung damage already, right? Because that would make you have difficulty breathing and lower the blood oxygen, which is kind of puzzling because he only tested positive, Friday, right? And he didn't seem to have symptoms before that. So it's kind of puzzling that they would say that. But so that's one thing I don't understand.
I'm trying to think of these doctors at Walter Reed. That's pretty amazing. So are these I don't even know if you know this, I'm just spitballing. Are they like the doctors of the president, or are they just doctors at Walter Reed and the president happens to come in and now they're the doctors? Like, that's a pretty unbelievable task that you now all of a sudden are faced with, is treating the president with this, all these experimental things. That's crazy.
Well, the president has a physician, right? Personal physician. And that doctor can get other doctors involved in the treatment of the president because he can't do everything. He's not an infectious disease physician. So Walter Reed is, a military institution, and they take care of high-profile people. And then, so the White House doctor can go and say, all right, I need this team to take care of the president and have everything at his disposal. So I think that's how it works. And many other presidents have gone there. Ronald Reagan went there when he was shot. And this is very cool. His personal physician said, I want the trauma doctors to take care of him because he wasn't a trauma specialist. Trauma when you get shot or cut or something. Yeah. And that was a good decision, to get the right people to take care of the president. That's the best thing a doctor can do, is find the right people to take care of the patient.
Yeah, there's an amazing story there, and I to be a fly on the wall, right? It seems like, we'll find out every day, but it seems like that's a pretty quick recovery, and maybe is that because we seem to have gotten it very quickly for him? Are you amazed by how quickly he's recovering?
Yeah, I am, but on the other hand, he got two pretty good drugs early on, and I think that's the key here. Remdesivir and the monoclonals, and dexamethasone too, which is weird. But the other two he got early, and that's the key. If everyone could get these drugs as soon as they test positive, we would have less hospitalization. But the problem is the monoclonals and remdesivir have to be given intravenously, right? They're not a pill. They're not just a shot in your arm. You have to get it in your veins. So it makes it a little harder to give to people.
Okay. Any final thoughts here, Professor?
I want people to remember that this virus is not gone. In New York City now, parts of Brooklyn are being shut down because the infection rate is going up. And I'm afraid it's going to go up more as we get further into the school year. The New York City schools are all open. So I'm a little worried about that because I think we're going to see a lot of transmission. It's been pretty low here. So people need to be vigilant. Please don't take please take it seriously. So the president of the United States is infected. You can take it seriously. It's really important.
Yep, it knows no bounds. No, it doesn't. It won't not infect someone just
No,
for any other reason. Doesn't care. All right, Professor. Thanks for all this insight. This is wonderful. I'm super grateful. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Microbe.tv this week in virology. Yeah, I haven't read any of that stuff anywhere. Super grateful for the professor. All right, we got one more segment coming up. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. I've enjoyed today's show. I think today's show has had everything that we were talking about in that very first segment. Edward R. Murrow, World War II era news anchor. He said, just because your voice now goes all across the world does not mean you are any wiser than when it only went to the end of the bar. He said that around World War II. I think everyone needs to hear that when they hop on Twitter today. Ann Applebaum, she's at The Atlantic. She lost her mind this weekend. And she wrote this long article about how Trump is a super spreader of information. Very, very clever. She said, since I wrote this article, Trump has himself photographed working, signing a blank piece of paper with a binder photoshopped in afterwards to make it seem more serious. He can't even lie competently. And then she started linking to all these conspiracy theories about the blank paper he was signing, and the video was manipulated to edit out a cough or something, and the binder was photoshopped on the table to make it, and there's this weird reflection on the table. What's going on here? And then 3 hours later, after this whole meltdown, she ends with this right here. First she says, okay, there's disagreements about the Photoshop. Let's just say the pictures were very obviously staged, right? So she walks it back. So first Photoshop, and she's like, okay, maybe not Photoshop, but definitely staged. And then this one right here. And yes, of course we're all now paranoid. We're meant to be paranoid. That's the point of the White House's endless, repetitive, constant lying. It's designed to make us that way. She blames Trump for her paranoia. Right, the whole theme of this show and moving forward is I'm not responsible for other people's, not dementia, what's the word I use? Delusions. Same thing here. This woman is making Trump responsible for her paranoia. And I can't do it anymore. Let's get to some ancient wisdom here. Let's start off with Proverbs 22:24. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. I have become ensnared these last couple of weeks. I have become ensnared. Proverbs 13:20, walk with the wise and become wise. That's why I like to read Rod Dreher, for instance, and like to talk to the professor. For a companion of fools suffers harm. I have been keeping companion with fools for too long. It's getting to me. 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. I've been keeping bad company lately in the political world. And then I think the most relevant is Proverbs 16:6. There's a list of 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that the Lord finds detestable. And the final one is a person who stirs up conflict in the community. How about that? That's something the Lord detests. A person who stirs up conflict in the community. People are just spewing conflict all day long, just from a machine gun that is the internet from the comfort of their own home. They're just spewing conflict all, and then they just go back on with their lives. One last point today. It's gonna be a long week. There's a vice presidential debate on Wednesday. Oh my goodness, forgot about that. It's gonna be a long week. There are so many people who are going to be trying to manipulate you. We so badly want certainty. Like that, we just as humans, we want certainty. There's so many unknowns, we want certainty. And you can't find it, right? You won't be able to find it. You won't, or I should say it like this, you won't be able to find certainty today in something that's gonna happen in the future. For instance, we so badly wanna know who's gonna win the election, right? And that's what all these polls are all about. Who cares about the polls? Why would you even care about it? Why would they even do a poll? Who cares? It's because you wanna know who's gonna win. You wanna get a little sneak peek, a little heads up on who's gonna win. Let it go. Let it go. You can't. No. Live in the moment. People are looking for certainty, but I think what they're really looking for is peace. And peace can only be found in the present. Peace can only be found in the present, in the moment. Live in the moment. There's so much worry. COVID, election results, blah, blah, goes on and on and on. We got to do one day at a time, one moment at a time. Let everything else aside, or lay everything else aside. There's a Greek word. It's used 3 times in the Bible, in the New Testament. It's apothemehi. Apothemehi. It means to lay aside. Now, when I say lay aside, like the first thing that comes to mind is be like lay aside this pen, right? It just means like, oh, like put that away, like lay it aside. But it's way stronger than that when it's used. So here's the 3 times it's used. Romans 13:12. Let us lay aside, apothemehi. Let us lay aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Right? So that's a little more than put aside the pen, right? Lay aside the pen. Lay aside the deeds of darkness. Ephesians 4:22. In reference to your former manner of life, apothemehi, lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit. And then the one that you've probably heard before, Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us apothemehi, let us lay aside every encumbrance, every burden, and the sins which so easily entangle us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Those lay asides, those are pretty big things. We're laying aside the deeds of darkness, the old self, and everything that burdens and entangles us in sin. It's so funny, just to go back to the first segment, like, I don't know why I fell for it. I was so ready to put these truths aside for the next couple of months, just really kind of lean into politics and see what happens. And just a couple weeks later, I'm like, nah, that was bad, that was terrible. It's terrible, I can't do that. It's not good, it's not healthy. It's not true. It's not real. I was picking up the deeds of darkness. I was going back to the old self. I was burdening, entangling myself. More than, not only, I thought this was a time to put aside these truths. No, you idiot, Slater. This is double time. More than any time ever, we need these truths. So we'll try this for a while, see how it goes. True story. Mike Slater. We'll see you tomorrow. Spread the word.